Hi, and welcome to the Metropolitan Opera. I'm Peter Clark, the Archives Director at the Metropolitan Opera, and right now we're 2 floors beneath the stage of the Metropolitan Opera at Lincoln Center. I'm going to show you some of the things that we have in the Met's archives which record our 135-year history. The Met is the most important opera house in North America, and our history is basically the history of opera in our country. So I'm going to show you a few examples of the kinds of things that we have, the treasures that we have that record that history, that give us background into what the last 135 years of opera in the United States has been, many of which have only been seen by a few privileged people. But in the digital age, we now have the opportunity to digitize this collection so that it can be preserved to begin with, and also shared with people, making it searchable for researchers, for people around the world who want to know about the Met's history and opera history in general. Our history is contained in these archives, and we preserve as much of the history as we can. So here are some particularly interesting things I wanted to show you that we have in the Met archives. From the very first days of the Met, when the Opera House opened in 1883, we have this book of stock certificates that the original owners bought. People like J.P. Morgan, the Vanderbilts, the Roosevelts, who built the Opera House, which opened in 1883. We still have the stock certificates here. Also, we have photographs from 1883. This is the singer Christine Nielsen, who was the soprano who starred in the opening night Faust. And we also have these card photos of people like Nellie Melba in her costume for the opera Faust later on in the 1890s. In addition, we have a great deal of artwork at the Met, much of it done by designers and directors through the years who designed productions. We have this costume design for Rosa Poncel in La Juive, 1919, in which we not only have this beautiful artwork, but on the back we have her own comments where she was explaining to the designer how she wanted it to look. So things like that are unique, and many people don't even know they exist. Here's another piece of artwork, costume design for Birgit Nielsen, done by the famous designer Cecil Beaton for a production in the 1960s. We have so many other kinds of artwork here on the wall, many photographs, and one kind of photograph that I want to show you in particular that is particularly fragile are these old glass negatives, which were done by the photographer Herman Mishkin, a very well-known photographer in New York in the teens and 20s. This is one of Maria Barrientos and Barber of Seville. But these are particularly fragile. The big advantage of digitizing them is not only to preserve them because they break very easily, but also that they can be reversed automatically in the process of digitizing them. So we can look at them easily without having to send them out to have a print made of them. The Met's history is, of course, also recorded in many different kinds of documents, and we have preserved all of them here. A great deal of it tells the story of the Met's performance history, but it also tells the story of the institution as a business institution. We have, for example, contracts. This is a contract for the soprano Kirsten Flagstad in 1934. But we have contracts for artists going all the way back to about 1910. We also have this kind of ledger this is Enrico Caruso's ledger page that tells exactly how much he was paid for each performance and what the operas were and the dates. This was for 1917-18. We have, in addition, correspondence from the general managers and from other people in the administration, which track the history of the Met through the years. Much of this is about the business of the Met, but a lot of it is also about the artistic history of the Met. This, for example, is the telegram with which Rudolph Bing fired Maria Callas in a very famous incident in 1958. One of my favorite things in looking at Met history is this document. This is a ledger that gives us the summary of the Met's expenses and revenues from 1910 until 1948, all handwritten out and all broken down by different kinds of expenses and different kinds of revenue. We can tell the whole history of the Met's finances from this one book. But again, it really needs to be preserved, both from deterioration and made available so that people can make use of it. This is the kind of thing that people haven't made much use of until now, because it hasn't been that available to them. Another kind of document we have are these box office statements, again, all kept by hand. This one happens to be from 1910. This was the performance that was the world premiere of Puccini's La Fanciulla del West, conducted by Toscanini, with Caruso and Emmy Destin in the cast. And this gives us exactly the number of seats that were sold in each section of the house and how much money it brought in. It brought in $20,000, which was a lot of money in 1910. So we have a huge collection of those as well, again, giving background to the Met as a business, but also as an artistic producing organization.